Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very warm welcome once again to Coffee Table. Telecom industry, if I say it's one of the largest in Pakistan, it would not be wrong. It is top when it comes to paying taxes, and obviously it has brought down foreign direct investment to the tune of $10 billion over the last couple of years, maybe in the last 10 to 15 years. The industry has been growing very fast, and the operator and international investors had been very enthusiastic. Their passion, their appetite for investing more was very good. But recently, the industry is facing challenges, and that appetite is weaning away because of some say it is because of the wrong fiscal policy that is being used, and it is very short-sighted, some say. And some say that natural saturation point has come, which had to come on the basis of population and income growth and other things. To discuss these things, we have today with us Mr. Aslam Hayat. He is a Senior Vice President in Telenor, which is one of the operator. They bought license earlier through competitive bidding, and they are operating in Pakistan since then. Large customer base. Aslam sahab, very warm welcome.
Thank you, sir.
What do you say about it? This is saturation is because of the, natural process, natural saturation, or it's wrong policy?
No, I think it's not a saturation point in terms of subscriber base, because if you look at Europe and some of the Asian markets, there the penetration is over 100%, and we are still staggering around 60-70%. So I don't see that there is a saturation point. And plus the Internet of Things which are coming, and then this machine-to-machine communication. So number of SIM has to be 200 or 300 times more than the population, because one person is using for his phone, for his electronic meter, for his car, for his kids going to school with their wristwatches. So there is a lot potential here. The problem is that the government is somehow not very business friendly. So the policies which are coming up, and it's not just the tax policy but also the overall business environment, which is not conducive for further investment. If you look back in 2004 and 5, the business environment was such that people and investors were willing to invest in multiple sectors, and telecommunication was one of the sectors where there came a lot of investment. Telenor alone till now has invested over $3 billion. But what we see now is that if you look at the return,
They are diminishing.
Diminishing, because in last 10 years, the dividend which we have paid over shareholder is only $262 million. But against that, we are paying much more taxes for that. And the government is continuously taxing this sector. Every year we get a new surprise, we get a new tax. Whenever we try to start a new business like this 3G, 4G, and immediately before the business takes off, the government starts heavily taxing it. One of the example is that this broadband, mobile broadband started only last year. And within 1 year, Telenor alone has totaled these 9,000 around BTSs. So we converted those BTSs towers into 3G in less than a year, over 5,000. So that was the level of investment and then efforts, because we know that there is a potential in Pakistan. But what happened after that was that we were slapped immediately multiple taxes. One of the tax was this, especially in Punjab, it is 19.5% on broadband, mobile broadband. That tax was there. And then you had the federal government doubled the taxes on the handsets. And then there is a SIM supply tax, and then you have got withholding tax 14%. So all these taxes actually reduces the appetite for the customers to afford telephone. Couple of years back, if he was giving 100 rupees, he was getting a value for 100 rupees. Now if he is paying 100 rupees, he is getting a value of 65, 70 rupees. So that is causing not only problem for the customers, because affordability is already the people in Pakistan, it's a large significant number of people who are below the poverty line. And telecom sector, especially mobile, they are trying to address that bottom of the pyramid. And in Pakistan, the average revenue per user is less than $2 per month. And the global average is around $16. So, and on terms of taxes, we are one of the highest. We are approaching around 40%. So this, that's pretty alarming.
40% gross.
I mean, the total cost of owning a phone is around 40%. And then there are multiple taxes, there are double taxes, and then all sorts of unpredictability. You get biometric verification.
So from unbusiness friendly, this one line in English language, what I have understood you mean is the wrong policy, not wrong administration.
Well, I would
because
say,
usually when we say it's not business friendly, one window said you have to go to the STO and a bribe here, that it means bad admin. But what you are saying is it's wrong policy.
Well, before I comment on that, only last week the World Bank Index of Ease of Doing Business was published. Pakistan was at 136 out of 189 countries on the global index of ease of doing business, and this year it's on 138, so it's slipping down. And one of the reasons is the taxes, and you're absolutely right, it is a problem with the tax policy.
I'm asking.
That is exactly it. The tax policy is not business friendly, is not growth oriented, which is the correct term. It is not helping the businesses to grow. So from that angle, yes, it is not business friendly.
It is bad for your sector, or it's an odd man out in the macro picture as well? Because the government, I mean the finance minister, he's very much perturbed and he's concerned, obviously he has to, that the state should not die of fiscal starvation. So the macro picture, telecom sector is one sector. So what I am asking you is, it's the telecom sector because it's obviously very easy to get taxes from. They are targeting telecom sector unfairly or because of laziness, or it's a macro picture that is responsible for all that?
This is a much bigger tax policy issue. Ideally, the taxes should be more on the direct side and less on the indirect side, and there should be a broader tax base. Unfortunately, in Pakistan is that there is less effort on broadening the tax base, and they're trying to continuously income tax, continuously squeezing the people or the companies who are already paying taxes. Now, telecom sector is a sector which has a lot of transparency on its accounts, on its billing and everything else. And it's very easy to continue squeezing more money from the telecom sector. If you compare, just one example on this, federal excise duty or general sales tax, even the luxury services pay 10% withholding tax, whereas telecom sector is 14%. So that shows that we are considered not just, way above the luxury service, or probably something like injurious goods, because normally that is where you want to tax more, so that you want to discourage that. But this is what you see in the telecom sector, is that the discrimination is that the telecom sector is being highly taxed as compared to the other comparable sectors. And similarly,
unjustified.
Well, it's unjustified because it's not a luxury item anymore.
Because of the laziness of some babu.
Yes, because they are unable to collect more taxes. Yes.
Bad admin as well.
Well, yes, eventually, because
reflecting on bad policy.
Well, it starts with bad policy and then gets into, because if the policy is business friendly and growth friendly, then you are very careful and identify that what are the growth sectors. Like in telecommunication and especially a broadband side, this is again a World Bank study which says that a 10% increase in penetration contributes about 1.38% in your GDP. So if you really want to increase the size of your GDP, you should be actually supporting internet and telephony. And this is what exactly identified by the government in its Vision 2025. But on the other side, on the tax side, there is a total disconnect. It is seen as a cash cow, and they continue introducing new taxes every year.
Right. So you are convinced that it's bad policy. You are convinced.
We are living through it.
Yeah, right. So here we take a short break, and after the break, we will try to analyze the situation further for the benefit of our viewers. So please stay with us.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome back. Aslam Saab, I mean, it's a very good picture that you pay a lot of taxes, but FBR say you don't pay taxes. Zero tax return.
Well, on the income tax side, the taxation structure in Pakistan is very complex. And if you just look at the income tax, there are 4 different slabs.
Right.
1% is the turnover, annual turnover. There is 17% of the accounting profit, 8% as minimum tax, and 32% as tax on profit. So you have to pay tax on any of these 4, whichever is higher.
Or all of.
Whichever is higher, obviously, that covers the other 3. Now, what happens is that with this especially, and then there is one, there's 5.5% on the imports and equipment and all this stuff. So that's also withholding tax.
Adjusted against the income tax later.
It's actually the 5.5% is full and final liability. So they wrote it just.
Then it's not withholding.
That's what they call it. That's why I'm saying it's very complex. So what happens is that at the end of the year, and of course, they keep on deducting advance tax at different places. Like in electricity bills, you have got on your withdrawals, on your transactions, on your invoices from the money you collect from the other operators and your vendors and all this stuff. So that all is collected before we actually pay at the end of the year. So what happens is through this process, if the withholding tax or the advance income tax is collected more than our liability, then instead of 0, we would be claiming refund. And normally you don't get refund from FBR. So what they carry forward and then it's adjusted in the subsequent year. Especially for this 2014-15. In 2014, there was a 3G auction. In the 3G auction, we bought 5 megahertz of spectrum for 3G at $147.5 million. And then there was a surprise advance withholding tax of 10%. So even on the sale of the spectrum, on that one count, we paid 1.47 billion rupees in one go. Now, that will take time to be adjusted, which has not yet been completely exhausted. And after that, we have paid another 1.4 billion rupees as, again, advance taxes, income taxes. So it's a totally wrong statement that Telenor is not paying income tax. Rather, we are paying more than the liability we have. And we don't get refund, and it's keep on accumulated. And probably it will continue for another 2-3 years that we don't have to pay tax at the end of the year because the government already has collected it.
So they have already collected income tax for several years, and,
yes.
and that is not. So are you taking up the issue with the FBR on that?
We certainly are engaged with them, and even at the time of this 3G auction, we told them that we will not be able to give you this 10% withholding tax because you already have advances with you. So exactly at that point in time, there was a 1 billion rupees refund lying with FBR for Telenor. And we say that if you return that, we'll pay you this 10 million, this 10% tax. And then after meeting with the finance minister, he agreed that our refund is genuine and they should. So we got that refund. So even at that point in time, there was an advance tax. So even after that, now they have got that 1.47 and another 1.4 by now. So they have a lot more advanced tax than our liability to pay.
You're right.
And we will have those refunds again, and I'm sure this is going to continue till 2017-18.
So they're around.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you see future of industry then? Because what I have gathered up till now in this discussion, that tipping point must not have been very far away then, for some operators at least.
Well, I think you need to understand it from investors' perspective. Investors invest in a country obviously to make profits and get some return out of it. In Pakistan, there was very high hopes, especially from the international investors. There was a lot of interest, there was a credibility of the government and all this stuff. And the overall investment environment was good. But now what we see in last 2-3 years is that there are a lot of surprises. The tax policy is not consistent. It's always a new surprise, a new tax. So because of that, the investors' appetite to invest is diminishing. And the reason for that is that if you buy the government bond, $500 million, and in 5 years, the return is over $400 million. But if you invest $3.1 billion in Pakistan, as Telenor has done, in 11 years, what you get is $262 million. So basically, the message the government is giving to the investor is, don't invest into the countries, don't create jobs, don't pay taxes, just give us loan in terms of bonds, and we will give you better return. And that is a very wrong message which the government is giving. So if you invest, create jobs, contribute to the economy, to the GDP, you will get less, or rather nothing. And if you just give loan, you will get almost double in 5 years. That's a very, very wrong message the investors are getting.
Investors are getting net negative returns. I mean, not in absolute terms, but as compared to the interest rates and all that.
Yeah, I mean, Telenor has 13 operations in different countries. Whenever, as a company, Telenor Pakistan, we go for an investment decision, their discussion is that why we should ignore the other 12 countries and invest into Pakistan, because we get better return in those countries. And we actually get nothing in Pakistan, because if you don't get even 20% of what you have invested in 10 years, then obviously there is very less hope for the investors to continue investing into it. And what they also see is that the government is giving them a message that if you invest into bonds, you will get better return. You will get double in 5 years or 6 years.
Right. So how do you see future of industry and the company and all? Because if government is not going to change policy in the next 3 years for very obvious reasons.
Well, I think government is getting the message.
If they change policy now, the return on the policy, the harvest is not there for them to have it. The next government is going to benefit from the policies, but the taxation, it is sort of a money which is there.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think if they correct the tax policy now, they don't have to wait for 3 years. Obviously, there might be a dip in some of the taxes, but when the investment is coming, that compensates that. And also, very specifically, that the government has got 20 megahertz of spectrum available, which is up for sale, and they are unable to sell it because there is no buyers. But if you correct your policy, and the price for these two blocks is 10 megahertz and 210 and then 291, so you will get $510 million now, and your tax will also bounce back in 2 years' time.
Companies have some business plan for the spectrum which they're looking for.
Well, with this
what
tax,
can they do with it?
The current we
or
have
just have the spectrum and place it for posterity and all.
Well, you can't have spectrum as an asset and not use it. That's not a good idea, because that's not a physical.
So then must have some business plan then.
Exactly, and the business plan with this tax policy, it's not interesting, and especially there were hopes before this auction But after the auction, we got multiple surprises. There was this 10%, then there was increase in the custom duties from 5 to 25%, double taxes on the handsets, the smartphones, obviously which are needed for these 3G, 4G services. And then you got data taxes. So that shows that probably the government is not interested to grow the internet or the broadband sector, because this is the sector which is going to bring efficiency into everything.
System.
The e-government, your e-commerce, your export of ICT services,
Everything.
everything.
I mean, it would be a good traffic.
It is an engine for growth.
Right.
And don't shut it down. I mean, that's basically the message. But in the short term, they are also losing money. The operators are not investing into the spectrum anymore, which means that a resource which is lying with the government, they could have said it. And if they come up with this a more business-friendly tax policy, then not only they will get this $510 million out of those 20 megahertz, but also there is a demand for 3G more spectrum, 2.1 gigahertz. But now currently, people or operators are not buying it because they know that the return on investment is not good.
Right. Here we take another break, and after the break, we'll try to synthesize all of that into getting some sort of clear understanding on the situation, and obviously some recommendation for the GOP and other stakeholders. So please stay with us.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome back. So, how do you see future now? How do you synthesize? I mean, at some point, it has to reconcile.
Well, we are at a point that the government has to reconcile. And it's not just one sector, which is telecom. Almost every sector has started crying that this is not business-friendly tax policy. And you have seen from all the sectors. And to some of the sectors, especially where the local investors are involved, the government is giving them relief. But so far as the international investors, we are getting this feeling that probably the government is not going to listen to us. And we have been trying to meet the finance minister for quite a few times. We didn't get
With no success.
With no success. And this is even more alarming that a sector which is contributing about 7% of the total tax collection in Pakistan is not getting an audience with the finance minister. This is really, really worrying. And because of this situation, I don't think we would be able to continue investing unless there is a positive change in the tax policy.
Tax policy.
And I'm continuously insisting that is because in Pakistan, if you look at the perception, there are multiple challenges internationally. They think that Pakistan is, you've got law and order situation, you've got terrorism, you've got energy crisis and all this stuff. But while sitting here as an investor, we know, I mean, as Telenor Pakistan, that the number one threat or risk or challenge in Pakistan is the unpredictability of the tax policy.
Not fiscal starvation.
I mean, not even terrorism, because this has become number one challenge for us. We cannot plan beyond 1 year. For a capital intensive, which is no plan, because for a capital intensive this telecommunication sector, you have to have plan for at least 3 to 5 years all the time. And with the rapid speed of improvement in the technology, you continue investing to maintain the quality of service. But if you cannot even plan for more than a year, it's very difficult to continue doing that. I mean, going back to this, when we got all the investment approvals for 3G rollout, we didn't have this 10% in our plans of advanced tax. We didn't have this increase from 5 to 25% of the.
Will be adjusted later on.
Yeah, but the cash flow is gone.
That's right.
And then this 5% custom duty suddenly went to 25%. It was not in the plan. So 1/4 of your investment approval is gone. You cannot invest into the rollout. You cannot. The people will not get the service because there is a sudden change in the tax policy. So these kinds of things are pretty shocking, and I'm sure for an international investor, these are very significant. If they do not have trust into the government policies, it's very, very difficult for them to invest.
At the end of the day, you are just doing business. I mean, it's a business, run-of-the-mill business, I would say.
Yeah.
It is specific to because it's a big cow, you can milk it and all that. Because to the telecom sector, it's the general ignorance at the policy level, which you're claiming.
Telecom sector, I think in specific, because almost all the operators, mobile operators, are international investors, so probably they do not have a constituency or a kind of influence which a local investor might have. But we also see at the last couple of months that almost every sector is crying. So there is something seriously wrong with the tax policy. We know that there is a discriminatory taxes against, it's sector specific taxes. You've got 16% GST on others, and when it comes to telecom, it's 19.5. Why? No reason. There is withholding tax of 14% on the people who contribute only 200 rupees a month on their telephone usage. They are not even a taxpayer at the end of the year. They cannot claim refund for that, but you keep on squeezing them. So this actually shows that there is something seriously wrong with and with this environment, it's extremely difficult. And we think this cannot continue for a long time. And the government has to realize this as soon as possible so that they can restore the confidence of the investors. Because it's the investors who are bringing in FDI, who are giving jobs, who are contributing to the GDP. If these things are not there and you keep on getting loans to meet the deficit in the budget, you can imagine what will happen after a couple of years when you will have to return those loans. And the telecom sector, I said in the beginning that from 2005 to until now, the total taxes which has been collected and deposited and their own tax liability of the mobile operators is $8 billion. Now, if the government has to get $8 billion, how many terms and conditions they have to accept from those donor agencies, World Bank, IMF, or everybody else? But here it's liability free. And then if you look at the spectrum payment which we have made all for operators only 2014, the government, in order to match that price from a donor, had to do a lot of things to satisfy them, and still they have to return with interest. But in 2014, what they get in terms of price of the spectrum, that was with no liability. So the government has to focus more on promoting business so that they can generate more revenue, more taxes for the government, and more contribution to the GDP. And that's how the right economist would understand or would do. But if you continue squeezing and don't think about tomorrow.
Okay, right. That was the page one. Are you bringing let's go on a lighter side as well. Are you bringing out new products?
Well, in the existing investment, yes, but there won't be a new investment. We are getting into Internet of Things. We are trying to transform ourselves from hardcore telecom service provider to digital service providers, which means that we would provide platform for other businesses also, especially for e-commerce, especially into this Internet of Things.
Where television as well.
Television, if the restriction continues on the ownership, then I'm not sure. But definitely in terms of delivering the content to the end user, we will have a role. Because this small screen can do wonders. And that includes people using it, the live television, the live video on demand, all these things. It's already there, but we want to increase it to a real time.
And on the content side? No?
Of course, on the content side, because content is king. Where you have a literacy rate very low in Pakistan as compared to the rest of the region, people would be more interested into using content instead of using English language to probably use internet. So content will be one of the biggest
television content.
television content, video on demands and all this stuff. And especially when you have a YouTube ban in Pakistan for a very long time, I'm sure the content will be local.
Right. Thank you very much. And with this, we come to the end of the program. The situation seems to be very grim, but I think there should be some ray of hope. And how it comes, but one thing is very obvious. If you ask someone for a one-liner, the government need to revisit the tax policy. With this, we come to the end of the program. Next time, next topic, next guest. Please keep watching our program.